What's up everyone, this is NyhlekDreams, and today we're going to be taking a look at the new Plasmatron 9000 that was released last night. If you don't already have this weapon, you'll be able to pick it up from the weekly store for 1680 gold, but we're going to hop right into this review and check out some of the perk rolls that are available, as well as the stats that we have on it, and a lot of these are influenced by the hero loadout we're using, so they're not base stats, but at first sight you'll be able to notice that the damage and the headshot damage number are the same, so this is basically just clarifying that there's no separation between the damage. You cannot hit a headshot, so accuracy is not something that you really have to go for when aiming for the head and stuff like that with this weapon. And moving into the crit chance, we have 43% and a 570% crit damage. So this is just a base 15 for the crit hit chance and a base 75, and once you add in all of the perk rolls, it just ends up being this 43 and 570. So don't get confused with how high the number is. This is all of it added in together, and as you can see, we have some new stats here to be looking at: the heat capacity, heat generation, the cooling speed, and the overheat cooldown. And we've got some new perks here, the cooling rate and all of that are available. Basically, this is mainly just keeping the same aspect of reload speed and magazine size. In my opinion, it's just a different way of saying it, so it'll kind of perform a little bit differently, but essentially it's just the same thing as reload speed and mag size. But for the rest of the build, you'll see that it is locked to energy here with the 20% damage, and then we have a double crit damage roll and a crit rating. And for the 6th perk, we have the critical hits cause 7 exploding projectiles to scatter to the surrounding area, and they can only occur every 3 seconds. So these are all the weapon rolls that we decided to go with on it, and I'm not going to directly compare it to any other weapons stat wise here in the schematics, because I want to make that representation and show how well it stacks up to another weapon in its category during the gameplay portion. So we can go ahead and transition and go to the hero loadout and see what we're running. And we've got Beetlejuice in the commander slot for Make It Count, which is basically just a large increase in pistol critical hit damage. For the team perk, I decided to go for Bioenergy Source, dependent on the way that I play, and getting some survivability through the energy used up when using abilities. In the support team, we have Hip Shot, which is increasing pistol damage by 17%. Then we have Return to Sender in the 2nd slot for a little bit extra damage on Seismic Smash. This slot can be switched out for Skull Ranger Ramirez for Locked and Reloaded, or Saurian Might with T-Rex Jonesy for a more damage focused build if you want to do that. I personally just prefer having a bit of the AoE, so if you're more on trying to get all damage for your pistol, go ahead and go with one of those two, but this is what I run for Bioenergy Source and just trying to make better use of surviving. And in the 3rd slot, we have Blaze of Glory, which is a phase shift, is going to increase your pistol damage by 35% for 4 seconds. Then 6 Shooter, which increases pistol damage by 20% and your impact as well by 25% for the first 6 shots in a magazine. This I don't really believe will work on the Plasmatron 9000, as you don't have a clip to reload, and it's also seeming that the cooldown and the heat reduction for the Plasmatron is bugged at the moment, and so you're not even really triggering that reload that would technically be there. So this is more focused for other pistols in the build. And in the last slot, we have Plasma Arc, which is just an added effect on energy damage that has a 20% chance to zap any nearby enemies for 58% of the damage dealt. And with the hero loadout out of the way, we can go move into some gameplay and see how this pistol performs. Now with the Plasmatron 9000, there are a couple of key important things that I would like to touch on to help others see the usefulness in a weapon such as this. And it's mainly just to basically categorize pistols and help others to understand the way to better use them. So pistols are much like shotguns in the sense that you do categorize them into a specific area, and they get certain uses to better suit the loadout altogether. With shotguns, you can have 3 separate categories that they can fall into, where they'll be long range or single target miss monster, or even AoE focus, and pistols are much like the same, where you could have an area of having a really strong mist monster killer as well as AoE pistols. And a lot of people are familiar with Jack's Revenge and its high damage output. That would be a sort of single target mist monster killer that you would want to use. And then you have other areas of pistols like the Freedom's Herald, the Tiny Instrument of Death, and then the Plasmatron 9000 that are fitting into this AoE damage category. So knowing where this gun fits in, we can directly compare it to the weapons that are performing much like it. I personally like the Freedom's Herald more than the Tiny Instrument of Death, so in the gameplay I'll be comparing the Plasmatron 9000 to a Freedom's Herald and showing the performance of both of them and how well they perform in comparison to the other. A couple of pros that I find with the Plasmatron 9000 is I actually really like the fire rate and being able to consistently hit a target in comparison to the Freedom's Herald, where you have a reload after each shot, and then also not being able to trigger propane explosions with the Plasmatron 9000. I find this to be a helpful boon in making sure that you don't set off any propanes in trap tunnels. So if you're the type of person that likes to shoot down a trap tunnel, this will be a safe bet to get some AoE damage and help clear things up, while also not trying to explode it and, make your team mad in the process. And overall, through testing this weapon, I have found that it's got some seemingly decent damage in the sense that it's able to get some pretty good AoE group clear, and it does seem very reliable. However, when directly comparing it to a Freedom's Herald or a Tiny Instrument of Death, I seem to find more consistency in kills due to the higher crit damage numbers, and that's pretty important because even non-crits from something like the Freedom's Herald seem to be hitting the same amount as crits from the Plasmatron 9000. So even if you don't end up hitting that crit chance potential, your non-crits seem to be doing just as much damage as the crits from the Plasmatron 9000. And when you don't hit crits with the Plasmatron 9000, you're really feeling it because the damage numbers are so low that it's not really doing any damage output to the large group of husks that you're trying to use it on. And while I do find this to be a fun weapon to use, just overall when using this versus a Freedom's Herald, I do find that the more reliable choice would be a Freedom's Herald due to the higher damage numbers and being able to consistently kill targets due to those damage numbers. Because one thing that I've also noticed while using the Plasmatron 9000 is you have to consistently shoot your target for a lower damage, and that could lead to put you in a bad situation due to the projectile based shots that are coming out of the Plasmatron 9000. You have to make sure that you're up closer in order to lead them and make sure that they connect with your target. And the same can be said for the Freedom's Herald or the Tiny Instrument, that you have a projectile that you're trying to make sure that you hit. However, you can shoot those at more of a distance rather than having to be up close to make sure that you connect with something like this Plasmatron 9000. One pretty big con to put on the side of the Tiny Instrument of Death and the Freedom's Herald is that they will actually explode propanes, so a lot of people will find that they can't make more use out of those two weapons due to not wanting to explode propanes in trap tunnels. And a lot of people do have a playstyle for wanting to shoot down their trap tunnels and make sure that husks are weakened for their traps. So if this is more of your playstyle, then the Plasmatron 9000 might work better for you, but I find myself just taking out large groups of husks out in the open rather than trying to shoot down my tunnel, because I don't want any chance of a propane throwing into a tunnel and ruining anything that has been set up, because that could put the objective at a worse standpoint than just trying to shoot anything to clear it up in the first place. All in all, I do find this to be a pretty interesting and unique weapon, and I find that you can have a lot of fun with it, but I don't think that I personally would be using it in the future over a Freedom's Herald, just because I've been using one for so long and I've been accustomed to how the weapon fires and how to be accurate with it, so I find those higher crits being able to yield a more consistent kill. But one more thing to note about the Plasmatron 9000 is that it might not perform the way that people want once Epic actually decides that they can get around to fixing the way that these cooldown and these heat reduction perks are working, and see what those stats are actually supposed to be performing as, because it might actually take down the performance of the weapon once it's all said and done. But that's it for this video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments about the Plasmatron 9000. If it's a really enjoyable gun for you, I want to hear about it, and if you've got a way to make it better or seem more useful, I'd really love to hear about it, because I'm always open to new ideas and maybe seeing something that I missed. But again, I just want to thank you all for your support so far. The positive and encouraging comments have been amazing since I've been back, and I can't wait to see even more of those, and I can't thank you all enough. I hope you have all been enjoying this event as much as I have, and I can't wait to see the new content in the coming weeks. But thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.